Hello, listeners. I'm your host, Jeff Hatter. Thank you for tuning in to Yerba Travels Podcast, the place that delivers all the marvelous wonders of our beautiful world from first-hand accounts of people who live in these exotic places. After listening, head over to yerbatravels.com to find out more cool information. That's yerbatravels.com. And don't forget to subscribe and join the Yerba Travels community. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's conversation. All right, my guest today is a Scouser living in Moscow, and his name is Matt. Matt, welcome to the show.
Cheers, Jeff. Good to be on. Good to share my story.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about it, and it's a pleasure to have you on. So why don't we start with you introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do, and tell us about where you're living.
Okay, so for all the UK listeners or viewers, I'm sure you're all familiar with what a Scouser is, but for those who aren't, a Scouser is someone who was born and raised in Liverpool in the United Kingdom. So that's my hometown. And I was a teacher in the UK. And it was 12, 13 years ago now that I decided to quit my job in England and look for adventure somewhere else. And that's what made me land in South Korea. And I taught in South Korea as an English teacher for almost 11 years. So it was a pretty long stint in South Korea. 4 years I was teaching in a middle school, and then 7 years I was teaching English at the university level, training teachers, and everything, life was settled. 11 years in the same country, good group of friends, good network. And then the university that I was working at, they decided they were closing the TESOL department, and that was where I was working. So suddenly after 11 years, I found myself within a 6-month period looking like I was going to be out of work. And then an opportunity arose to come and teach in Moscow. And having previously traveled across Russia, I just thought, wow, this is a pretty unique experience and opportunity. And it was a bit of a gamble, but yeah, I decided to leave Korea after 11 years and to take up a new job and a new challenge in Moscow. And I've been here for 3 years, and my job is basically, I'm a private tutor, a private English tutor for a prominent, wealthy Russian family here in Moscow. It's a pretty, I know it sounds like a crazy job to many people, but for here in Moscow, it's quite common for these wealthy families. The children will go to school, but in the evenings, they like to have tutors or language teachers to basically encourage or to ensure that their children learn different languages. So the family that I work for, I'm one of 5 tutors. There are 2 Spanish tutors, 2 French, and I'm the English tutor, and there are 3 kids. So you can see how much of a big operation it is, despite the fact that the 5 of us are just employed by one family.
That's amazing. So it sounds like you mentioned that you lived in Korea, and here in Korea we have academies, or in Korea they're called hagwons, where the students go to those after school. But is it more common for students to have these private tutors and have so many like what you're doing? Is that more common than like an academy, an after school academy?
Yeah, for sure. I think you'll find that quite a lot of these families, they're quite busy. So they employ tutors. Okay, there's a wide spectrum of situations that happen. Some will have nannies and tutors. Okay. So and they will have a team of nannies to look after the nannying duties, the child caring duties, and then they'll have tutors. Some families only have tutors, in which the tutor's responsible for the nannying side of things as well. So there can be a wide range. You can be employed as a nanny, you can be employed as a tutor, or you can be employed to do somewhere in the middle where you're expected to do both. So
are you changing nappies?
Yeah, luckily for me, the kids that I teach are a little bit older, and therefore the tutors, we're mainly responsible for making sure that they speak either English, French, or Spanish fluently, and that they're passing the language exams, and that the grades in school are as they should be.
And what's the kind of drive for language?
I just think that it's probably a lot of these families will expect or hope that their children will go to university in the States or in Europe,
Okay.
or the UK. So obviously language is crucial. The families that want multiple languages, it's just, I'm not going to say it's a status. I'm not going to say it's like an accessory, but yeah, they want to give their children as many opportunities as possible. And if they can be multilingual, that's a big advantage that they have.
Yeah, why not?
It's
Right?
also, yeah, why not? And it's also my kid can speak 4 languages. My child can ride a horse. My child can play the piano. So
Yeah.
similar to Korea, these parents have these expectations where they want their children to be talented in many areas. And here in Moscow, it's no different. And I think these wealthy families, they can afford to have language tutors, horse riding tutors, piano tutors.
Yeah.
So I think that's the rationale behind hiring private tutors. It's not solely for homework and for the grades and the exams. It's to promote language in a natural, Krashen's natural approach, where you just let the kids, you play table tennis with the kids, you play football with the kids,
Oh,
you
wow.
go on trips. So when you see me on a yacht or a private jet, that's not my private jet, that's not my yacht. I'm just traveling with the family that I work for, and that's how they travel.
Okay.
And I'm fortunate enough to go along with them, and for 2 weeks we'll be wherever, Maldives, Seychelles, and I'm spending 10-12 hours a day with the kids, and they just learn to speak English.
So you're not just on vacation when you're traveling with them. You're actually still working though, right?
Yeah, all the time. So when we
Yeah.
travel, basically I'm working nonstop.
But hey, who doesn't like a private jet or a yacht every now and then, right?
Of course. And is it a case of I'm sitting down doing lessons? No, I could just be playing tennis for 2 hours, and then we can go and swim in the sea for an hour, and then we can, if we're in Dubai, we can go to an amusement park for the afternoon. So I would say it's academic and pastoral. So the role is to be a mentor. I always describe it as maybe like a sensible, educated older brother. So
Yeah,
my
you're
role
giving like a
is to
whole
be,
holistic experience. Yeah, that's a
exactly.
good way that's kind of what I was thinking when you said I'm kind of like the older brother. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of what I was picturing when you were talking about this. You're spending so much time with them, and not just sitting down giving grammar lessons or language instruction, but you're incorporating everything in the communication skills that we have, right? The body language,
Exactly.
the idioms and
And
everything.
even things like teaching manners and holding the door open for people and saying please and thank you. That's what they want. These families, they want their children to be well-rounded individuals, not just academically, but the way they dress, the way they play sport, the way they play instruments,
Mm-hmm.
the way they conduct themselves, to be confident yet well-mannered. So that's where these tutors come in, because they want, I would say, role models for their kids.
Yeah, I think as the world changes, it's not just the wealthy people that want that for their kids. So many people are traveling, well, prior to COVID, but so many people were traveling, and we want that experience to learn from other cultures, to learn how to interact with people from, say Thailand or Dubai or
Yeah,
Spain, wherever. And I think that's an essential skill that we're all kind of looking for right now. And I think that job that you're in is, immensely beneficial to the kids that you're working with.
yeah, for sure.
And two, what a fantastic opportunity for you to get to kind of express yourself that way as a teacher, mentor, instructor kind of role.
Yeah, I think these jobs do exist in the UK and America. You know, I see them advertised all the time. They want these so-called super tutors to homeschool the kids, or to make sure that the kids get the right grades for a certain high school or a certain university. So these jobs do exist in primarily North America, the UK, and maybe the Middle East, but it's very much academic focused. There's a very clear academic goal in these jobs in the US. You're going to be a private tutor for my family. Well, these are the goals, and they're all academic: an A in physics, an A in biology, an A in mathematics. Whereas I think the job in Russia, of course, the academic side is still very important. So these families want qualified teachers. They want background in either early childhood education or linguistics or whatever field is suitable for their kids. But these families in Russia want more than just the academic side, and they want sporty. They want people who can maybe speak a second language, so English and French or English and Spanish. A lot of them will stay in the job requirements. We want someone who plays football. We want someone who plays chess. So
well-rounded person.
Yeah, so I think there's less academic pressure in my job compared to my equivalent in, let's say, New York or London. Whereas I'm sure families in New York and London, they're judging me on basically the academic grades. Whereas I think in Russia, the grades have to be at a certain level, of course, but equally important is, are you teaching my son, encouraging him to play sport? Are you keeping him fit? Are you being a good role model? Are you teaching him how to plan a trip? Are you actually going on trips? Are you able to take my son and go on a trip with my son to St. Petersburg? Or I've been to Switzerland with the kids that I work for. So it's slightly different to a typical tutoring job that you may hear about or read about in New York or London or Dubai. I think the tutoring jobs in Moscow are slightly different.
So I think a lot of listeners would be quite interested in knowing why why Russia kind of attracted you. You know, we talked about how there's certain jobs like what you have in North America and, you know, in Europe and Dubai and the Middle East and so forth. What was it about Russia that kind of attracted you to go there instead of somewhere else?
That's a good question. Well, I think first and foremost, 4 or 5 months before taking the Russia job, I traveled across Russia on the Trans-Siberian with a friend from the UK who was living in Korea, and we took the short flight from Seoul to Vladivostok, and we took the train across Russia, stopping off at Irkutsk, Baikal, Yekaterinburg, Moscow, St. Petersburg. It took us about 3.5 weeks, so we had a good experience of Russia.
Yeah, I'd say so. I didn't know it was that long. Is that normal for the Trans-Siberian? About 3-4 weeks or so?
If you wanted to go from Vladivostok straight to Moscow on the train without getting off the train, it's 6 nights.
Oh, really quick. Okay.
So it's a 6-night train, but of course we spent 3 or 4 nights in each city that we stopped at. So
I gotcha.
It took it to about 3.5 weeks.
That's a good way to do it. You know, kind of break the trip up a little bit, get to sightsee. I'm sure some of those places that you mentioned were some beautiful, beautiful places. Were there any specifically on that Trans-Siberian that you would recommend people go see if they were to hop on that train?
I would say probably where you have to stop and get off is Lake Baikal, the largest, deepest freshwater lake in the world. Maybe not largest, I think largest by volume of water, I think, because I think a couple of the lakes in in
Maybe
the
some,
US, Canada.
yeah, I
Or
think
maybe,
some of the Great Lakes might be quite big, but I get what you're saying. We'll look into that.
yeah, I think it's maybe the largest by volume of water, and I think it's because Baikal is so deep. So yeah, we went in summertime, and Baikal was, when you're on the lake, for me being from Europe, when you're on a lake, you can see the other side of the lake. You can actually, okay,
Yeah.
the lake, the other side of the lake is over there. Whereas Baikal, I felt like I was sort of in the middle of a sea or an ocean, because we were on a boat for an hour going into the middle of the lake, and you still don't see the other side.
No land.
So
Yeah.
no land. So Baikal is amazing, and I hear that in winter it's also spectacular. So my plan this February is to go to Baikal and to give it a visit. It's quite unique because it has some organism living in the lake, which basically just eats everything. So the lake is crystal clear. It's so clear because it just eats any
Like eating all the bacteria and all
exactly all the
the
bacteria and
fungi and moss and
foliage.
stuff
Yeah,
around. Yeah.
exactly. So you can see
Oh, a crystal clear lake.
yeah.
Wow.
And I've heard when it freezes in the winter time, when it gets to February, you can then drive across the lake, completely drive across, and you can see, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 meters down into the lake. It's crystal clear.
Even the ice, when you drive across, you can see down
Yes.
through the ice.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that's incredible.
So that's the plan for this February, to go and check Baikal out in the wintertime. Summertime was amazing. We were swimming in the lake, having a great time. But I've heard that in winter it becomes even more mythical, magical, so to speak.
Yeah. What surrounds that lake? Are there mountains like on one side, or is it flat? What's around
I
that
think
lake
it's
or where
pretty
you
flat,
were?
yeah. Yeah, it's pretty. I think it's pretty flat. And
Flat? Okay.
if you're south of, I think if you head south of Baikal, then you're very close to Mongolia. So I know the lake is not too far from the Mongolian border. So it's yeah, I think Siberia, although it has obviously mountainous regions, it's typically, or it tends to be quite flat in places.
Okay. Interesting. Wow. So you were cruising along on this train, hopping off here and there, and then I guess the train ends in Moscow. You got off, and what did you think? This is where I want to. This the next place. I know I'm getting ready to lose my job. This has been amazing. What was going through your mind?
So at this point, I didn't know I was about to lose my job.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I was there purely as a tourist. However, I was blown away by Moscow. Um, as I mentioned before, before going on air, that you go to certain places with these expectations of it's going to be amazing. I think, Paris syndrome. So
Yeah.
you go to Paris, you go to wherever, but because you've read books or you've watched movies or for whatever reason, you go with really high expectations.
Yeah. You get this mental picture in your head and say, this is exactly what it's going to be, amazing. And yeah. And then you get there.
Yeah, and you get there and it's not so great. And I think you can apply this to anything. People, you've got to go to this restaurant or you've got to see this movie, and everyone's raving about the movie. This movie's amazing. And then you get there and you think, Whereas maybe if people hadn't told me about the movie and just let me go to watch it off my own accord with no expectations, I might have went, that was cool.
Yeah.
But I think because whether it's a restaurant, a movie, a country, a city, you can build these expectations internally, so they're coming from me.
Yes.
But I've been to places where I've thought, I can't wait to go here. And when I've got there, it hasn't been so good. I think the flip was my experience of Russia and Moscow. I came with very low expectations, probably didn't really know what to expect. I probably thought
a bit of bias going into the place too. Kind of, I've heard bad things, or movies have portrayed it in one way, right?
Exactly. And I think Russians are going to be cold and it's going to be very grey. It's going to be very Soviet, very Cold War era environment.
Right.
And then I've got to not just Russia, but especially in Moscow, I was just blown away, because if you ever visit, if you can visit one place, go to Moscow, and you'll be blown away, because it's just so beautiful. I know, and I speak to Russians, and I say, listen, this is the most beautiful city in the world, and they agree, but they say it's only been like this for 10 years. So they said,
It's
if
new.
you were to come here in the 90s or early 2000s, it wouldn't be like this. So
It's really
I think
changed then.
I think it's been a very recent drive, a recent push towards spending a lot of money on making Moscow what it is, because architecture.
Yeah, can you
History.
explain that a little bit? Like, what makes it so beautiful now? Like, what's the attraction of Moscow now, so people can kind of get an idea of what you're talking about?
I think it's very European in many ways. So, open plazas and squares and quite a lot of pedestrian areas. So I know in especially in London, or maybe New York, when I was in New York, there's very few places which is purely for pedestrians, right? There's
Yes.
Whereas Moscow, the center around Red Square and the Kremlin, it's very pedestrian, it's very European. So lots of cafes, lots of places you can sit outside in summertime, and
So it's like a proper square for people to go and hang out and
yeah, there's
mingle.
restaurants and coffee shops all around
Yeah.
Red Square, or the streets that surround Red Square.
Hmm.
And then you've also got, it's quite a religious country, or historically it was religious, and religion's making a big comeback in Russia now. So you've got all of the Orthodox churches, and there's just churches on every corner, you've seen St. Basil's with its,
Mm-hmm.
how could I describe it? It's not a dome, it's like an onion shaped dome.
Yeah, an onion spire, like a dome spire. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
really hard. They're like a Hershey kiss on top of these
exactly,
on top of
exactly.
these pillars.
It's like an ice cream, when you get to the top of the ice
Yes.
cream, and you just do the top, you finish it with a bit of a whip.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and the churches are obviously beautiful, colorful, unique. Um, reminds me of Orthodox Greece or Orthodox Turkey. So very
Mm.
European in some aspects, but also, Asian in certain different aspects. So I think, then you've got the Bolshoi theater. There's a lot of theaters, a lot of museums. I think Russia is known for having a rich history in
In the
literature
arts.
and culture and
Hmm. Yeah,
science and
I believe it's the
technology.
Russian ballet that's one of the top ballets in the world, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of ballerinas from England, I know their dream is to get to the Bolshoi theater and to be hired by
Wow.
The Russian Ballet Association. So yeah, I think it's just, for me, Moscow's just a very culturally rich place, and it's also very clean and I feel very safe.
Well, I like hearing that, because one thing that I really enjoy, whether I'm living in a place or I'm traveling in a place, is one, that kind of communal aspect. I really like that, like having the open squares, where people can mingle and go to the restaurants and the bars, and then kind of walk up and down the streets. I like that. Plus the kind of mix of the cultures that you're talking about, how, there's part Asian culture and you got Western culture kind of filtering in. And it really sounds like they're mixing quite well together.
Yeah, I think, culturally, yes, it's still, I would say demographically, it's still quite Slavic. It's quite
Okay.
predominantly, Caucasian. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a couple of reasons why Moscow is so clean and so safe. I think London and Madrid and other places in the world are maybe just as beautiful, but are not kept as clean or as safe as Moscow. And I think that's probably because most people in Moscow were either born in Moscow, or it's not as, I wouldn't say it's as multicultural as many other cities.
Okay.
So maybe with that, they take pride in the city. Maybe why would I graffiti, or why would I drop litter? Because this is my city. This is my,
Right.
you know, why would
They
you do
take
it?
pride
Well,
in their
maybe,
city. Yeah.
of course. So maybe that's because it's not as multicultural as other places. And I think also, again, it may be a negative, there are so many cameras and so many police that
Yeah.
it's because I always say to my Russian friends, you know, Moscow's so safe, you know, and I was thinking, are the people more honest here? They just said no, but if you commit a crime, you'll get caught because of Big Brother, because of CCTV, because of the amount of police. So I think it's the deterrent to make a crime or commit a crime is bigger than the value of taking a wallet or taking a phone. So for me, who engages in no criminal activity, I have no problem with cameras and police on the streets. Do we agree
Does
with
that
Big
make you
Brother?
feel a bit safer knowing that all those are there? Do you feel safer?
Yeah, I feel safer, and you know, I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm just saying it makes for a safer city.
Okay. Yep.
And that's I'm not going into the politics of, you know, Big Brother and human rights and, you know, can people track you? I'm just saying, for me, Moscow is very, very clean and very, very safe. And two explanations are probably because Muscovites probably take a lot of pride in their city, and because of the budget of Moscow, the cameras, and they have a lot of low-skilled workers coming from Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan. So there's a lot of cleaners on the streets. That a lot of, you know, people
So
making
those
sure
guys
the
are hired to
parks.
do the cleaning and stuff. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So with all that beauty that goes on and all the safety that's there, what has shocked you the most, whether positively or negatively? What's really shocked you the most about Moscow?
It's a good question. You know, and first of all, I wouldn't want people to think that I'm saying Moscow's this utopia. I think when you get out of the center of Moscow, it's maybe not as safe and it's not as clean as the center. So I wouldn't want to portray Moscow or Russia in that light as being this place that's super clean and super safe. No, but in the center of Moscow, for sure, I'll put my neck on the line and say, if you're in the center of Moscow, it's super clean. You won't see any graffiti. You won't see any litter. And it's very, very safe.
Okay.
In terms of what shocked me in Moscow.
Or about Russia, just Russia in general. I know you traveled to a couple different locations and cities. Is there anything you just went, oh, didn't expect that? Or, you know, that's exactly what I thought it would be. You know, you see an old Soviet tank ride down the road in some countryside, or,
Yeah, no,
just something, anything shocking.
I wouldn't say nothing has been overly shocking. There's a couple of moments where I've had. So I'll just give you, and it's a small example. So
Okay.
I lived in the suburbs when I was first in Moscow. So now I'm living in the center, but you know, when I first came in the first year, I was living in the suburbs, and very, very few people speak English. So once you get to the center, cafes, restaurants, shops, supermarkets, people will speak some amount of English. When you go into the more suburban districts, then English becomes, you know, more and more scarce. So I remember going to the supermarket on my second day in Moscow and just going in, and no one spoke English. And I remember being at the milk section. So I wanted to buy milk. So coming from the UK or even in Korea, you know, there'd be maybe 4 or 5 options of milk.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it'd be, you'd know it's maybe low fat, full fat, or somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
In Moscow, there are literally, when you go to the milk section, you have literally, I would say, 200-300 choices of dairy products. So there'll be percentages. So 0 to 5, then it'll say like 1.2%, 1.8%, all the way up. So I'm just like, wow, what? I just want milk. So I ended up buying what was, it said like 3%. And I got it home and poured it onto my cereal. It was cereal at the time. Tasted it. What I bought is something called kefir, Kefir. It's like this fermented yogurt drink that is very popular in Russia. So not only do they have and it looks like milk, so it's supposed to be very, very healthy, but it's like a sour cream. So for me, what was surprising was just the amount of milk or dairy similar products you can buy. There's one full aisle in any supermarket. Yeah, and it's milk, it's sour cream, it's different yogurts, different.
All dairy, cheese, and
all dairy. Yeah,
whipped creams and stuff like that. Holy crap! Yeah. So how did you, living out in the suburbs and nobody speaking English, how did you figure this out? Did you have to go online? Did you get to Google this, or was there somebody you talked to?
Yeah, I had some contacts in Moscow, and they helped me out in the first couple of weeks. And then I decided in the first week to learn how to read Cyrillic, to learn how to read the Russian alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that just through a YouTube video, and it took me. It's not so dissimilar to English. A lot of the letters are the same in English and Cyrillic, and then there are some, new and different ones that I had to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember just I remind me of when I first learned Hangul in Korea. You learn to read without knowing what you're reading. You can just decode, right? You're just decoding the symbol and matching the sound to the symbol.
Exactly.
I remember sitting on like the bus in Korea and just looking at because there's signs everywhere, right?
Trying to read every sign and go, I can read it. Oh yeah, I can read that.
Exactly,
kimchi jjigae, okay.
Exactly. And then once you know the word, it starts to, like, you could be in a pub and it'll be Budweiser. Budweiser. And then you get it, right?
Exactly.
And I think that was the same in Russia. In the first couple of weeks, I taught myself how to read. And then I was able to, once I knew that milk was moloko, I was able then to pick up the bottle and go moloko, milk. And
yep.
Okay. And my Russian it's not so great, but I know enough words, and I know enough of the drinks and the food. Like you just said, if you know what doenjang jjigae is, kimchi jjigae is, when you then read the menu, you go, okay, that's this, that's that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would say how I survived in Korea is how I'm surviving in Russia. Learn to read the alphabet, know a lot of the most commonly spoken words and phrases, and that's it, and that's probably a bit disrespectful to, I lived in Korea for 10 years and people say, can you speak Korean? Not really. I can have a basic conversation with a taxi driver, but I can't. And that's probably where I'm at now in Russia. I can.
Well, that's pretty quick. You've been there, you said earlier, what, 3 years?
Yeah, almost 3 years, yeah.
Wow, and you're at basic conversation. That's pretty good. Do you have any plans to kind of keep learning and build the kind of basic conversation skills you can have everyday conversations?
I think similar to Korea, once I was able to read and to learn the survival Korean, the survival Russian, important words and phrases. Can I have a beer, please?
Yeah. That's all
human
you need.
nature is we become lazy.
And beer, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll hold my hand up and say, I've become lazy, and I'm happy with the word that I know, and unless I have long-term plans to stay here, which at the moment I just don't know, but probably not, then I would
Well, I
say
think
there's
a
no.
lot of people, especially travelers and even some expats, like you just get comfortable, especially living in Korea. The Korean people are so helpful that if you don't speak a full sentence, you know, if you can just say a few words, they're willing to help you, you know. And if you learn the basic restaurants or a cab or at a bar, at a department store, specific words, you're not really going to have many issues.
Exactly.
What it comes down to is having those conversations. When you sit down at a dinner with a large group of people, then you need to have more vocabulary and stuff. But I'm sure
I
Russia's
also
the same
think,
way.
yeah, and I also think that the profession that I'm in, and the fact I was living in Seoul as an English teacher, most of my Korean colleagues were in the English language field, whether it was they were professors or teachers or co-workers, or from the publishing company, or from the football team I played in. They joined the football team. They spoke English, and sometimes if I would speak Korean, my limited Korean, they would just speak English. They just prefer me to speak English. And it was the same. It's
Easier.
the same in Russia.
Mm.
Yeah, easier. And a lot of my friends in Russia, I know them from either playing football, or they're my co-workers, or in the field of English language. So they all speak English. So even if I do try to use Russian, they'll just say, Matthew, just speak English. It's easier for us. We prefer it. It's more efficient.
Yeah.
Just speak English. It's quicker. It's more efficient. And I found that also living in Seoul. I think maybe there would be more motivation to learn Korean if I was outside of Seoul and I was in a different field, whether it was different industry, business. Then you have to speak the language. Whereas being an English teacher, most of my colleagues in Russia and in Seoul spoke English to a very, very high level.
So talking about language and being able to communicate, you mentioned that in the center of Moscow, it's pretty easy for people to speak English. When travelers want to go there, they can probably order in English. Is there anywhere in Moscow that you would highly recommend that people go to, whether it be a restaurant or an attraction? Are there things that kind of off the beaten path? You know, we mentioned St. Basil's earlier, and everybody wants to go see that when they visit. But is there something that's kind of off the beaten path that you go, man, I wish people would really see this if they came to Moscow, or they'd eat here, or something like that?
I would say, because Moscow recently Russia had both the Winter Olympics in Sochi in 2016, was it 17?
Was it 12 or 16?
I might have been 12.
12?
No, I don't think it was as far back as 12. It might have been 16.
16? Okay. Sochi, right?
Yeah, Sochi. And also it had the World Cup in 2018.
2014 was Sochi.
Okay, so Sochi was 2014, and then Russia had the World Cup in 2018. It's because of these two events, I think a lot of investment was spent on making the big cities, especially Moscow, very friendly to tourists. So, I think you can get a lot of information online about Moscow. And when you're here, a lot of things will be in English and so on. Something that I visited only recently, which, to answer your question, is the Gulag Museum.
Okay.
So I don't know why. I've always known about the museum, but for some reason, I never visited until maybe 6 months ago. And anyone coming to Moscow, I would definitely suggest taking at least half a day, maybe even a full day, to digest everything and to visit the Gulag Museum and to learn about, the history behind, why were the Gulags started, who was sent to the Gulags, and not the legacy, but the consequences which are still felt today. I'll just give you one fact. I didn't realize that a lot of canals which surround Moscow were built by Gulag prisoners.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And these canals, there's like four or five canals that connect to the Volga. It connects the Moskva River to the Volga River.
Okay.
So you can actually go via river to St. Petersburg from Moscow because of these canals that connect the big rivers. You can actually go from Moscow to the Black Sea
Wow.
by boat, and that's because they've connected the large waterways. They've connected with man-made canals, and I've always known about these man-made canals, but I didn't know that they were built by prisoners of the Gulag system. And I only found that out like 6 months ago. So anyone visiting Moscow, I would definitely suggest taking one day of your itinerary and just go and read all about it. And it's a fantastic museum. It's in terms of, it's very interactive, it's very English friendly, and yeah, it'll take you through a whole host of emotions. And it's pretty, it's sad when you go, but I think important that people understand what it's all about, and
Yes.
educate
Yes.
themselves, and yeah, because it's sad, and you come out of it and go, that's bad. But I
It's
think
an
it helps
eye
you.
opener. It's a huge
Yeah.
eye opener that people need to see. When I went to Cambodia, I visited the killing fields.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like you said, it's a heart-wrenching place when you walk in there. Like, you just get this dark, heavy feeling when you walk in. And where I was, they obviously don't have these huge fields anymore, but they have this kind of quartered off section. They have in one part of Phnom Penh, they have some of the prisons that you can still walk through the prison cells, and you can see pictures of the
And they
prisoners.
they were pretty strict with the documentation, right? So
Yep.
everyone had a photo. I've also been to is it the prison? Is it 21 something? Prison 21?
Oh man, I wish I could remember the name of it right now. It's something like that. It's a little bit off from the area that I went in the killing fields. In the killing fields, it still had a couple trees. And what really stood out to me in the museum was they had pictures, and the Khmer would take little children by their feet and smash them against trees. And the museum didn't hide any of this. You're not going to hide history. You're not going to fabricate anything. And I think it's something that people really need to see. So the Gulag Museum is a great example of, you're gonna be heavy for a day, heartfelt
Sure.
heavy, but it's an eye opener that I think people need to see and experience.
Yeah, and I think that's why also you need a day. You need a day to take your time when you're in the museum. Take your time to digest, and then take a time after it to
wrap
go
your
and have
mind around everything. Just
to contemplate and reflect. And so I think that's my tip would be, obviously, because everything else you're going to get from a guidebook, the Kremlin, St. Basil's, Red Square.
Yeah.
But I would say just take a day to go to the Gulag Museum and take time to process and to learn and to find out what it was all about, because it, yes, as you said, pretty harrowing.
Yeah, that's incredible. So you also mentioned a little bit earlier St. Petersburg, and I know that's another big place. How far from Moscow is it, and how can people get there? Because that's another beautiful place to visit, right?
Yeah, I think it's about, don't quote me exactly, it's about 700 kilometers. So most people, there's two ways you can either fly. I think it's about a 1.5, 2 hour flight.
Okay.
Or you can take the train. The train takes 4 hours, the high speed train.
Okay.
There's a famous overnight train that you can take. It's called the Red Arrow, and it's like, not like the Orient Express, but it's Russia's equivalent of the overnight train from Moscow to St. Petersburg. And there's a dining car, and you can have your own first class carriage. So I know a few people who have taken the Red Arrow. When I've been to St. Petersburg, I've taken the high-speed train. It takes about 4 hours.
Okay.
And it's amazing how different Moscow and St. Petersburg are.
Really?
St. Petersburg is very, very, very European. I feel like I'm in Italy. And also St. Petersburg, it was built by Peter the Great to be like Europe,
A
to be like
replica?
the, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole city, it was built at the same period. So therefore it's uniform. So
Oh,
the canals, there's canals everywhere. There's beautiful boulevards. So the whole city is in the same style. Very impressive. Whereas
that's
Moscow,
cool.
different, like everywhere else, different neighborhoods emerge at different times, and so it's, you can't say that it's got one uniform
Right.
style. Like in England, you've got the Victorian, in Liverpool, the Victorian Quarter, the Georgian Quarter, where different buildings have different architectural
Mm-hmm.
background behind them. St. Petersburg's just uniform, and it's very, very European, beautiful. And I think it splits people. Um, when I first visited Moscow with a British friend who was in Korea, and we took the Trans-Siberian, he preferred St. Petersburg and I preferred Moscow. I think it's just a matter of taste, of opinion. And it's, quite a lot of people who go to both cities, you'll get different answers from everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like you mentioned St. Petersburg's uniform. A lot of people enjoy seeing the architecture, and
Yes.
seeing different groups. It might be interesting to some, but to have one city, as you said, kind of uniform in the architecture is quite fascinating.
And I think also
Yeah.
for me, the difference between Moscow and St. Petersburg, because I'm from Europe, St. Petersburg doesn't feel so special, so Russian
So
to me.
Russian.
So,
Yeah, that's what I was
yeah,
going to
so,
say.
so for example, when I'm in, even now, because my house is about 500 meters, where I'm living now, it's 500 meters from Red Square. So
Wow.
I actually walked through Red Square this morning. So when I'm in Red Square, even now, I still pause and go, wow, St. Basil's, the Kremlin, this is Russia. And I feel like, I don't know, the might of Russia. I feel, wow, this is a very powerful place. I just feel like this is Russia. Whereas in St. Petersburg, when I'm in outside the Hermitage Museum, which was the summer palace, winter palace, it's beautiful, but I feel like I could be in Italy, I could be in anywhere in Europe.
Okay.
Whereas I think that's what attracts me to Moscow more than St. Petersburg, is the fact I just associate St. Basil's and Red Square and different parts of Moscow with Russia.
And it feels a bit more exotic to you. It's not so native. It doesn't
Exactly.
feel as native to you.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
How about when you travel? How about the people? Like, is there a different kind of vibe from the people that you get in Moscow than you do from,
Yeah, for sure.
all the different
So
places?
when we were on the train, traveling to different cities, people would for sure take an interest in us and want to speak and where you're from, and let's have some drinks, let's have some vodka. And the people were really open. In Moscow, you do get it to an extent, but nowhere near to the extent of the cities outside of Moscow. And I think that's probably true to Korea, or
Yeah.
when I lived in the provinces in Korea, then people would want to stop or talk, or you get to Seoul and
They
who
could care
cares?
less. Yeah. Yeah, they couldn't care less. Yeah,
They got that.
I was actually reading a little bit and watching some YouTube videos that people were saying, like in Moscow specifically, people don't really interact with people. That it's actually kind of, I don't want to use the word rude or disrespectful, but like when you see somebody like in the West, like if we make eye contact, you kind of just give a head nod or like, hey, what's up? Because you made eye contact, right? But what I read and what I saw, it's quite different. Like you just kind of look away really quick. You don't acknowledge people like we do in the West. Is that how you feel too? Is that kind of true?
I think for sure, yes. I've obviously read a lot myself and spoke to Russian friends, and yeah, it's complicated. I'm sure you'll get different theories as to why it happens. I remember speaking to a Russian friend and said, "Oh, yeah, there's a perception that Russians don't smile,"
Yeah.
and he said to me, "Why should I smile at a stranger?" And then I was just thinking, do you know what? You are right. In like,
Exactly.
I was thinking, walking around smiling. It's
Who's this
probably look a little
clown?
bit
What is
mad.
he doing?
So
Yeah.
I did think, yeah, good point. And whether that's from Soviet times or under the rule of the Tsar, I don't know if that's. I have no idea the reason behind, but I would definitely say that, yeah, maybe on the outside, Russians keep themselves to themselves. But I think again, it's probably a stereotype to say that they're cold people, because I think as soon as you interact with them, then they open up. And
Is it also true that they don't say thank you like we do? Like we say thank you for everything, don't we? Thanks for opening the door. Thanks for bringing my beer. Thanks for this. Thanks for that. Is it true that the Russians don't really do that? They don't say thank
no,
you.
no, that's not. I think they always say thank you,
Oh,
but
okay.
they might not open the door for you.
Okay. Or hold it. Will they hold it open? Like if they walk in first, or they just kind of, because Koreans kind of do that too, and this isn't a knock or anything. It's just they open the door and they go in and they let it go.
I'd say Russians will open it and let it go.
Okay. Well,
Um,
and kind of thinking about that too. Why do I need to hold the door for somebody behind me? We do it out of politeness. We see it, in the West, obviously, as being
so
polite,
there
but
have been times when I have opened the door for people and they haven't said thank you, for sure.
mm, mm,
But I don't know. I've never had it where I've had an interaction and I've given somebody something, or I've seen that they've dropped something and I've picked it up and give it to them. I've never had it where they haven't replied with pasiba, which is thank you. I've
okay.
never. But of course, I've had it where I've opened the door and they haven't said thank you. But maybe that's just because opening the door or holding the door is probably a bit
How about if
strange in itself.
you're at a restaurant and do you say thank you when your food's brought to you in Russian?
Yeah. Yes.
Does everybody at the table say thank you, or do they look at you like, why are you thanking them?
No, I would say when a waiter brings you some food, I would say most Russians, maybe it's just the Russians who I'm mixing
Mhm.
with, would usually say thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, being on this kind of topic, what are some misconceptions that people outside of Russia have about Russians? You've been there about 3 years now, a little bit more. Surely you know a lot of perceptions that people outside of Russia have. What are some of the misconceptions that maybe you'd like to set straight or discuss?
In my opinion, I'd say the biggest one is, I think people think that Russians are quite cold. And I think that comes from maybe not expressing a smile, or not expressing many things, like maybe not expressing anger. I've seen sometimes people will cut the line. Some people will jump the queue, um, and it's just accepted.
Mhm.
People seem to just accept it. Um, Again, the reasoning behind this, I'm not sure. Maybe they just don't want to get involved in a confrontation. They don't want to get involved. It's just not on their radar. I don't know. So yeah, I think maybe Russians might not show emotion on the outside, whether it's a smile, whether it's anger if someone's jumped the queue. But I think the biggest misconception is that they are cold people, because I think as soon as you speak with them, they open up as much as anyone else any other nationalities that I've came across. I think, humans are human, right? I
Yeah.
think once you have that first interaction, we open up, and,
Yeah.
Russians are the same. So when people say, oh, Russians are very cold, I don't agree with that, like 100%. I think, no, what you're seeing is something on the outside, which is maybe cultural or based on historical reasons. But to say that these group of people are cold in terms of character or personality, I would say is a massive misconception and stereotype.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's definitely one perception that people have about Russians, is how they're cold, how they're stern, right? If you know, listeners are probably thinking a Russian's got this square jaw, stern face, right?
And very, very, very strong and very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I'm not knocking Russians, but in winter, they will not go outside without a hat. So I usually don't wear a hat.
Are there any special hats? Like I see fur hats, and when I think of fur hat, because I'm from Kentucky, and Daniel Boone was really famous. He had the coon hats, raccoon. They were made out of
Yeah, I've
raccoon.
seen them. Yeah, yeah.
You know, they had the tail on them, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like Davy Crockett, right?
Davy Crockett, yeah, he wore one as well. Are theirs made out of anything special, like mink or?
I think there may be the more traditional older generation may wear these fur hats, but usually younger generation are just like anywhere else.
Yeah.
But you know, especially when I was in the suburbs, if I was outside in winter without a hat, I would get old. They're called babushkas, similar to ajuma. Tap me on the shoulder. Where's your hat? Get your hat on. And I just
and they took care of you like the ajumas. An ajuma is an old lady in Korean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like an older Russian grandmother would come up and say, "Where's your hat?" And you know, when I play football, you know, usually I'm the only one wearing shorts, and all the Russians are wearing long pants and hats, and I'm like, I thought you guys were supposed to be big tough Russians. And so again, I think that's a bit of a stereotype that we have maybe from movies and from books. We think, oh, Russians are strong and powerful and like, you know, like Rocky.
Exactly. I was just gonna say that.
Hey, what was his name? Ivan Drago, right?
Yeah. That's what we picture all Russians to be, right?
But no, they're just the same as everywhere else.
Yeah. Well, is there anything, any aspect of Russia, whether it be like a certain activity or a certain traditional game or a certain custom that you've really enjoyed while you live there that you would like to see spread to other parts of the world? Could be a game or a custom.
I think one Russian custom that I love, but it's the same as in Korea, is taking your shoes off when you enter a house or a dacha, a countryside house, or you know, or even in wintertime, if you want to enter a gym or you want to enter a hospital or anywhere, you have to put on these like covers for your, like these plastic covers that go over your shoe. You have to take off your coat as you're entering the restaurant, and you cannot keep your coat with you. They have to put it in the cloakroom, and it's very nice. And I think coming from the UK, we would just keep our shoes on even inside the house. And having lived in Korea for 11 years and Moscow for 3 now, I'm thinking it's a bit crazy. You know, you're outside in your shoes all day, and it's filthy, and then you just come home and you just straight in, your feet are on the couch and on your bed. I'm just thinking, wow, that's mad. So Russians are very similar to Koreans in that aspect, where shoes off, coats off, hang everything up, and they're quite conscious over hygiene in the house. I'm not saying that in England that we're not, but I just think culturally it's just more ingrained that take your shoes off.
Yeah, I think that I would definitely spread that. That's one thing when I go home, and it's kind of, I have kind of mixed feelings, because if I were to go over to, you know, a family member's house or a buddy's house, I would actually start to take my shoes off.
Yes.
You know?
And they're like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And then I think, oh yeah, what am I doing? I don't want to walk on that floor because
Yeah.
all the dirt and
Exactly.
everything's already there. So I'm like, you get those kind of mixed feelings, but that's definitely one that I would like to see spread. My parents have actually adopted that custom. They don't, when you walk in, there's like a little, we call it a foyer, a little room. You take your shoes off there, and then you walk into my parents' house. They do that.
I think in England, a lot of people have carpets, and I think carpets may hide, or so you can't see the dirt. I think if in Korea, it's like Russia, a lot of wooden floors, right? Or a lot of, so if you stand on it with a dirty foot, it's instantly visible, and you'd go, oh, I have to clean that. Whereas I think maybe in a carpet, you don't see it, so it's not as obvious until you actually think about it and go, okay, that's a bit mad.
Yeah, that's true. It does fall down until it gets trampled on quite a bit. It does. It takes a while to see the dirt and
Yeah.
to realize this area. That's true. But yeah, that's definitely one that I hope everybody does. Your feet, your shoes are filthy. Take them off.
And another interesting culture is a very Russian culture is giving flowers is very, very, very cultural. So you will see that on every street corner, there's a florist, and
Oh,
a lot of these florists are open 24 hours. So if you ever go for a first date, or you're going to meet friends, female friends, or you're going to meet parents-in-law, or whoever, it's very, very cultural. It's custom to bring flowers to this
okay.
first date. So even if you're just meeting someone for the first time, then flowers are a custom and a tradition, and I suppose that's why these florists are open 24/7.
Oh, that's interesting. Are there any specific types of flowers that they have that's common for giving, like on a first date or meeting
It's a good point.
people?
I'm not an expert
No,
in botany.
you're not a botanist.
No. I would say
What? I
maybe
thought you
possibly.
were. This whole conversation was about botany. We're done.
It's funny, Joe, when you're teaching English and then you start to, I think you might have had this in Korea as well, and you say, what's the name of this plant, or what's the name of this flower? And I'm just like, I don't know. It's so like, I
Yes,
don't
and
know.
colors. Yes, colors and
Yeah.
flowers. Yeah, I don't.
Once
I'm the same.
once it goes past roses and daffodils, I think that's probably me. I'm probably finished. But Koreans, they'll know, and Russians will know this is a such and such, and then
Yes.
once I see the translation, okay, I can see it's lavender, it's whatever. But I wouldn't be able to look at a plant and go, I know
Yeah, it's not
that's
something that just rolls off the tongue, right?
no.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, well, those are two good things. To the flowers. That's really interesting. It's something really
Yeah,
nice. I mean, we do that, like on Mother's Day, or in the US, Sweetest Day, you give flowers and whatnot. But 24-hour shops for any occasion. It's quite interesting.
yeah. I think it'd be quite. I think if you're Russian and you're meeting another Russian on a first date, I think it'd probably be quite rude not to bring flowers. I think it's that much ingrained. Obviously, times are changing, but I think generally my Russian friends have said, yeah, because I've asked them why is. I remember seeing these shops 24 hours, and I thought that they were maybe a tobacconist
Mm,
or somewhere you can, because what kind of shops would you want to be 24 hours? Maybe, a chemist or pharmacy or tobacconist, and they said it's a florist. And I couldn't believe it at first. I was like, you need florists on every corner, which are 24 hours. And I popped my head in one, and true enough, it was a florist. And then they explained that giving flowers is it's very cultural. So birthdays, you go to a birthday party, you go to meet the in-laws, you go to meet your grandparents, you go on a first date. It's custom to buy and bring flowers.
wow, fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I mean, we have customs like that, kind of like we take wine if we're going to a dinner party,
Of course,
right?
yes.
You know,
Yeah.
we're not really into the flowers scene, but that's a nice gift.
Yeah, and I think also that probably, like what we mentioned before, that's probably going against the stereotypes of Russians of
Being cold and hard
cold
and
and just big, powerful Russian guy with a big bouquet of roses under his arm. Like you probably think it's a bit mad, isn't it?
yes, the true beast going to see beauty, huh?
Of course.
Yeah. Well, Matt, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really wish we could go for another 2
Yeah,
hours.
of
I'm sure
course,
we
of
could
course.
talk about things. But as we wrap up, is there anything else you want to let people know about Russia, maybe that we didn't get a chance to talk to now? Anything you want to share before we sign off?
I would just say, from my experience and people around me who have visited me here in Russia, is I'm not saying Russia and Moscow is this utopia that you have to visit. But I would just say, don't judge a book by its cover. And I think I was as guilty as most in the past of thinking of Russia in this particular frame that I had framed myself based on movies and Western media. I would just say, don't take what we read or see in the media as for the truth. I'm here living a very different experience as to what I had previously thought Russia was like. So I would just end with, don't judge a book by its cover. Even what I'm saying here today, just don't take my word for it. Just come and see what you think of the country. And I'm sure that you'll, I don't want to
No
make
Paris.
I don't want to make a Paris syndrome to all of your viewers and go, and they'll get here and it'll be pants and that guy on the
the
podcast.
Scouser telling us to do
Yeah.
come here.
So I don't want to make it, big it up too much and make it into a Paris syndrome. I'll just say, don't judge a book by its cover. Come and see it, and I'm sure that your opinions and your viewpoints will change.
Well, that's a great note to end on. And I think that's, well said, because Russia is definitely a book that most people will judge by its cover, whether it be Hollywood or TV or whatever it may be. So thank you, Matt. Thank you for being on here. I really appreciated it.
No worries, Jeff, mate.
All right.
Take it easy.
Yeah. Well, that does it here for us at Yerba Travels. Thank you for tuning in. This is your host, Jeff Hatter, signing off.